Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a pediatric nurse at the local children's hospital. My shift had ended earlier than usual that day, so I volunteered to pick up my 5-year-old daughter from elementary school instead of letting her go to after-school care like usual. My husband typically handles pickup since his office is closer, but I thought it would be nice to surprise her. The elementary school sits on a busy street with parking only available along the curb. Most parents know the drill. You park wherever you can find a spot and make it quick. I'd done this pickup routine dozens of times before, so I knew exactly what I was doing. I found a decent spot about half a block from the main entrance. The street has 2 lanes going each direction with plenty of room for cars to pass, even when others are parked along the curb. I pulled up with my driver's side facing the street and passenger side near the sidewalk, just like always. My daughter came running out with her backpack bouncing behind her, excited to see me instead of going to aftercare. Her car seat sits directly behind the driver's seat, which means I always have to stand in the street to buckle her in properly. It's not ideal, but that's just how the setup works with our car. I got her settled and buckled in safely while she chattered about her day. She told me about some drama with her friend during recess while I worked on securing her straps. After I finished getting her safely buckled, I walked around to the driver's side, opened my door, and slid into the seat. When I reached for the door handle to pull it closed, I had barely started bringing it toward me when wham! A Honda Civic slammed directly into my door with such force that the door actually sliced into the Civic's front bumper like a knife through butter. The impact was so sudden and violent that for a second I just sat there in shock. My daughter started crying in the back seat, scared by the loud crash. The other driver backed up his car until I could fully open my door again, and when I looked, his Civic was sitting maybe 8 inches from my car. 8 inches! Who drives that close to parked vehicles, especially on a street where kids are constantly getting picked up? I got out to assess the damage and check on everyone. My door was dented and scraped, but thankfully still functional. The Civic had a nasty gash across the front bumper where my door had cut into it. Normally, in situations like this, you exchange insurance information, maybe take a few photos, and handle everything civilly. But this guy immediately hopped out of his car with the worst attitude I'd encountered in years. He started lecturing me about how I needed to look around before opening my door and that he had no time to react to me. I tried to explain that he hit my parked car and that I was barely moving my door when he plowed into it. He insisted I couldn't just swing my door open without checking and that this was my fault. If anything, if I had taken more time getting into my car, he probably would have hit me directly instead of just my door. The street isn't narrow. There's no sidewalk on the other side, giving drivers plenty of room to move over when passing parked cars. He definitely could have avoided hitting me if he'd been paying attention. When we started to exchange information, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. I could smell alcohol on his breath. It was subtle but unmistakable, that sharp, medicinal smell that hits you when someone's been drinking. Given that it was 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, this was extremely concerning. I called my husband to let him know what happened, and he arrived quickly with our other daughter. The drunk driver apparently thought this was his chance to get some male solidarity going. He made some comment about women drivers and how they just don't pay attention like men do. That was a huge mistake. My husband is normally pretty calm, but he absolutely hates when people make sexist comments, especially about me. He asked the guy if he was kidding, pointing out that he had just rear-ended his wife's parked car and now wanted to blame women drivers. My husband told him he smelled like a brewery and it was the middle of the afternoon. When the drunk driver tried to defend himself, my husband cut him off and said he wasn't going to listen to someone who hit a parked car while driving drunk, tried to blame his wife for the accident. My husband confirmed he could also smell the alcohol, so we decided to call the police. I figured the guy would try to leave once cops were mentioned, but he surprised me. He got excited about calling the cops and said he wanted to talk to them too. He claimed I had damaged his car and wanted it on record. I asked if he was sure he wanted the police involved, And he said absolutely and told me to call them right away. So I did. While we waited, I moved both girls to the nearby school playground where they could run around and not have to listen to this mess. The drunk driver spent the waiting time pacing around about how unfair the situation was and how he was going to make sure I paid for his bumper. When the officers arrived, they separated us to get individual statements. Mine was straightforward. I explained how I had parked legally, buckled in my daughter, got in my car, and was closing my door when he hit me. I mentioned smelling alcohol, and my husband confirmed it. The officers took notes and measured the distance between where his car stopped and mine. Then they went to interview him. My husband and I stood with our daughters near the playground watching from a distance while the officers talked to the drunk driver. We could hear him getting increasingly animated, gesturing wildly and raising his voice. He seemed convinced he was going to prove his innocence. Then we saw one of the officers pull out a small device. Even from where we stood, we could hear what happened next. The officer told him he needed to blow into the breathalyzer. The drunk driver agreed eagerly, saying this would prove he was right. There was a pause. Then we heard the officer's voice change to a more serious tone. He told the drunk driver he was under arrest for driving under the influence. The guy protested, saying that couldn't be right and demanding they test it again. The officer explained he had blown a .12 when the legal limit was .08. The drunk driver kept shouting that this was ridiculous and that I was the one who hit him. But the handcuffs were already coming out. When they led him to the police car, he kept yelling about how unfair everything was and how he was going to sue me for damaging his car. The irony was completely lost on him. One of the officers came over to update us while his partner finished the arrest. He told me the drunk driver had failed the breathalyzer pretty significantly. His car would be impounded, and I would need to get mine towed since it wasn't safe to drive with that door damage. I asked if I would need to come to court or anything. The officer said possibly, but honestly, this was pretty cut and dry since the guy hit my parked car while intoxicated. His insurance would have to cover everything. When the police car drove away with the drunk driver still complaining loudly in the back seat, I shook my head. He had been so confident that calling the police would vindicate him. Instead, what started as a simple fender bender became a drunk driving arrest, impounded vehicle, and likely a suspended license. My car ended up being repairable, though I drove a rental for 2 weeks while the work was done. His insurance covered everything without question once they learned about the drunk driving charge. A few weeks later, I got a call from his insurance company asking if I wanted to pursue additional damages since their client had been arrested. Apparently, they were trying to settle quickly to avoid a larger lawsuit. I didn't need to pursue anything further. My car was fixed, my family was safe, and he got exactly what he deserved by his own insistence on involving the police. I've been shopping at this Walmart for some years now. It's close to my house and usually pretty convenient. My old Honda has seen better days. The paint is faded, and there's a dent in the passenger door from when my neighbor's kid hit it with his bike, but it gets me where I need to go. The parking lot was packed for an evening, everyone rushing to get their shopping done before dinner. I drove around for a few minutes, looking for a decent spot that wasn't too far from the entrance. My back was killing me from lifting drywall all day, so I didn't want to walk halfway across the lot if I could help it. That's when I spotted it. A perfect space about 3 rows from the entrance. No cars on either side, plenty of room to get out. I put on my turn signal and started heading toward it. But when I got closer, I noticed this woman standing right in the middle of the space with a shopping cart. The cart wasn't even from the store. It was one of those personal shopping carts people bring from home. I rolled down my window and waved at her politely. I told her excuse me and that I was going to park there. She looked at me like I had just insulted her entire family. She said she was there first and I could find another spot. I tried to stay calm. After dealing with demanding customers all day, the last thing I wanted was another confrontation. I explained that there's no reserving spots in a parking lot and that I saw the space first, so I was parking there. She crossed her arms and planted herself more in the middle of the space. She insisted that the spot was hers because she was there first, and she wasn't moving. We're talking about a parking space at Walmart, not the last seat on a lifeboat. I told her I didn't want to argue and that I was parking there no matter what. When I started to slowly pull into the space, hoping she'd move out of the way, she completely lost it. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, waving her arms around like she was directing traffic. She yelled that this was ridiculous and demanded someone call a manager because she wanted justice. People were starting to stare. A few other shoppers stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. I just shook my head thinking this woman had completely lost her mind. She pulled out her phone and started waving it around like it was some kind of weapon. She announced she was calling the manager right now because I couldn't just steal someone's parking spot. I had to laugh at that one. I told her to do whatever she needed to do while I went inside to shop for groceries. I figured she was bluffing. Who actually calls a manager over a parking space? But I was wrong. Dead wrong. I made it about halfway through my shopping list when Dave, the store manager, tapped me on the shoulder. I knew Dave from my regular visits. Nice guy. Always helpful when I couldn't find something. Dave asked if I was the gentleman who had the incident in the parking lot. I was standing in the cereal aisle trying to decide between two different brands when this happened. It had escalated this far. I confirmed that it was me and asked what all the fuss was about. Dave looked uncomfortable, like he really didn't want to be dealing with this. He explained that the lady outside said I stole her parking space and she was demanding justice. She wanted them to ban me from the store. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Banned from Walmart for parking in an empty space? This was getting ridiculous. I reminded Dave that he knew me and that I'd been shopping there for years. I insisted I didn't steal anyone's spot and asked if we could just let this go and move on. Dave sighed, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. He said he was going to try to talk to her and sort this out, but asked me to please try to stay calm. I nodded and went back to my shopping, thinking this was the most absurd thing that had ever happened to me in a Walmart. I half expected her to show up with a mob of angry shoppers, ready to run me out of town. But when I got to the checkout line, things got even weirder. There she was, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. She told me I was going to pay for what I did, stealing her spot like that. I just laughed, thinking she had to be joking. I said I just wanted to buy my groceries and go home, and asked if we could please end this. She shook her head, still smiling that creepy smile. She said no way, because she already called the police and they were coming to arrest me for theft. I almost dropped my gallon of milk. Arrested for parking in an empty space? Was this woman for real? Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, the cop showed up. The officer walked over to me, a serious-looking guy with a thick mustache who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The officer asked if I was the one causing trouble over a parking spot. I sighed, realizing this whole situation was getting out of hand. I explained that I parked in an empty space and didn't steal anything, then asked if we could just handle this reasonably without making a big scene. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly not thrilled about the situation. He said he was going to need both of us to come outside and tell him what happened. So there we were, standing in the Walmart parking lot like we were about to have a showdown at high noon. The officer looked like he'd rather be dealing with a real crime when he listened to both our stories. After hearing us both out, he shook his head and said this was ridiculous. He told her that parking in an empty space wasn't illegal and asked her to please stop wasting their time and let people park in peace. Karen was furious. She insisted that I stole her spot and he had to do something. The officer wasn't having it. He told her he needed her to move along and let me finish my shopping because they had real crimes to deal with. When he walked away, she shouted after him that she wasn't letting this go and that he'd regret this. I shook my head, thinking this was the most ridiculous day of my life, but I had no idea things were about to get even stranger. After I finished my shopping and paid, I headed back to the parking lot. When I was unlocking my car, I saw her talking to another police officer. She was pointing at me like I was some kind of wanted criminal. I figured she was just trying to save face, but then officer approached me again. He apologized for bothering me again, but said she was insisting on pressing charges for theft. I said we were talking about a parking space. He nodded, clearly frustrated. He said he understood and was sorry for the hassle, but legally he had to take her statement and file a report. He told me I was going to need to come down to the station for questioning. So there I was, sitting in a small room at the police station, wondering how I'd gone from grocery shopping to being questioned like a criminal. The officer was doing his best to keep things professional. He asked if I had, at any point, intentionally taken the parking space from her. I had to laugh and said no, that I parked in an empty space and she was just mad because she didn't get her way. He nodded knowingly and said he understood. He promised to try to wrap this up quickly because this was just a formality at this point. I had no idea that she wasn't going to give up easily. I could hear her in the next room, yelling about how I ruined her day and how she got cheated out of her parking space. After what felt like forever, the officer came back and told me I was free to go. He said they determined that the charges were baseless and apologized for any inconvenience this had caused. I nodded, grateful that this madness was over. I headed home with my groceries, still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'd almost been arrested at Walmart for parking in an empty space. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets even crazier. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Turns out she had taken things to the next level. She'd filed a report claiming I'd committed theft and caused her severe emotional distress. The woman's audacity was beyond belief. I had to get a lawyer and deal with the court system. The charges were more serious now, and I was genuinely worried about the potential outcomes. During the trial, my attorney systematically dismantled her baseless claims. The judge was less patient than before and could see right through her act. When she took the stand, people were rolling their eyes at her theatrical performance. The turning point came when my attorney presented evidence that completely contradicted her story. The security footage from Walmart clearly showed that I hadn't stolen her parking space, and witnesses testified that her emotional distress seemed more like acting than genuine suffering. The judge told Karen that she had wasted the court's time with her frivolous accusations and had attempted to damage my reputation. The judge found her guilty of filing a false police report and attempting to mislead the court. Karen's face went white when the judge continued and ordered her arrest. The judge instructed the officer to take Karen into custody. The bailiff, who had been standing in the courtroom, escorted Karen to her arrest. She protested loudly, but it was clear that her actions had finally caught up with her. The judge announced that the court would not tolerate the abuse of the legal system for personal vendettas. The charges against me were dismissed, and the judge hoped this would serve as a lesson to all parties involved. Karen now had to face her own court date and deal with her ridiculous decision to press charges over a parking lot dispute. I've been married to my husband for 13 years, and his sister has always been a bit dramatic. She's the type who needs to be the center of attention and has a medical condition that she uses to get sympathy from everyone. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dismissing her health issues, but she definitely milks them when it's convenient. About 6 months ago, she got this dog and immediately started calling it her service dog. The thing is 18 months old and honestly acts more like an untrained puppy than any service animal I've ever seen. But everyone in the family just goes along with it because they don't want to deal with her meltdowns. I have 2 kids. My son is 11 and my daughter is 9. We also have 3 dogs of our own, plus a cat and some rabbits. Our house is definitely lively, but our pets are well behaved and know their place. Last weekend was my son's birthday party. I'd invited about 8 of his friends over, plus my daughter had 2 of her friends come along since they were younger siblings of the boys. It was going to be chaotic, but that's what kids' parties are like. My sister-in-law showed up with her dog, and from the moment she walked in, I knew there would be problems. The dog was already getting worked up just from the noise and excitement, but I figured maybe he'd settle down once things got going. The party was in full swing when one of our rabbits somehow got out of its enclosure and started hopping around the living room. All the kids thought it was hilarious and were trying to help catch it. Meanwhile, her dog was absolutely losing his mind. He was jumping up and down, barking, spinning in circles, and completely ignoring my sister-in-law. She complained that there was too much stimulation for her dog and asked me to get the rabbit back in its cage immediately. I told her we were working on it, but accidents happen with pets. The kids were being great about it actually. My daughter and her friends had said hello to the dog when they first arrived, petted him once, and then left him alone like I taught them to do with service animals. But this dog was acting like he'd never seen children before in his life. After about 20 minutes of chaos, my sister-in-law threw up her hands and announced that she couldn't handle the situation anymore. She said the dog wouldn't listen to her at all and that she had to leave. My son was disappointed but took it pretty well. He asked if maybe she could come back when it was quieter, so I suggested we do a mini celebration just for family the next day. I figured without all the other kids and pets running around, maybe the dog would behave better. Yesterday was that mini birthday. It was just us, my kids, my husband, and his sister with her dog. I thought surely this would be manageable. Nope, the dog was still going absolutely crazy. He was jumping on furniture, pulling on his leash, and acting like a regular pet dog, not a working animal. Then my sister-in-law had what she calls a flare-up. Basically, she gets dizzy and needs to sit down. This is supposed to be when her service dog helps her. Instead, the dog completely ignored her and kept trying to play with my kids. She asked my kids to please leave the room because the dog needed to focus on her right now. My kids looked confused but went to play upstairs. Magically, the dog calmed down immediately. But the second they came back downstairs, he started acting up again. I could see my children were uncomfortable. They kept looking at me like they didn't understand what they'd done wrong. I told her that if she couldn't control her dog, I didn't think he should be in my house anymore. She got defensive and said he was a service dog who goes everywhere with her, which meant I was basically saying she couldn't come over anymore. I pointed out that a service dog that ignores her during a medical episode and won't stop trying to play with children isn't really doing his job. She got angry and blamed my children, claiming my daughter had gotten the dog all excited last time and now he thought being around kids meant playtime. That's when I really lost my patience. I told her that my children had said hello to the dog once and then left him alone. I explained that if her so-called service dog couldn't handle being around kids while working, then he wasn't trained properly. She got all huffy and started packing up her stuff, saying she wasn't comfortable with my attitude toward her disability. I clarified that I wasn't attacking her disability but questioning whether this dog was actually trained to help her. She stormed out and later my husband tried to get me to apologize. I told him I wasn't sorry because I meant what I said. That evening, she sent me a long text message explaining that the dog had some kind of situation with a child during training and she was paying thousands of dollars to get him retrained. She tried to make it sound like she was doing me a favor by bringing him around my kids for socialization. So basically, she was using my children as unpaid training assistants for her poorly trained dog, putting them in an uncomfortable situation and then blaming them when it didn't work. I screenshot her message and sent it to my husband with a note explaining that she had been knowingly bringing a dog with behavioral issues around our children and using them for training without telling us. He called his sister immediately and told her she needed to figure out her dog situation before coming back to our house. Apparently, she threw a huge tantrum and hung up on him. 2 days later, I ran into her neighbor at the grocery store. The neighbor mentioned that my sister-in-law had bought this dog from some sketchy online trainer for $800 and had been telling everyone it was a fully trained service animal. She said the dog barked constantly and she had never seen it perform any actual service tasks. My husband finally realized his sister had been lying to the whole family. Now she's mad at me for ruining her relationship with her brother, but honestly, I just protected my kids from her entitled nonsense. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.